goals are they motivated by? So an achievement goal defines an integrated pattern of beliefs, attributions, or what we believe causes certain things, and affect or emotion. They all produce an intended behavior represented by different ways of approaching, engaging, and responding to achievement type activities. So simply, achievement goals are the purposes of achievement type behavior in classrooms. So I want to begin talking about achievement goals with a little activity. So with this activity, you have to use your imagination. Hopefully, you really have to use your imagination. Hopefully, none of you have had this experience. But what I would like to do is ask you to imagine that you are taking a difficult chemistry course. You've been working very hard studying, and you have a big exam coming up. On the day of the exam, you take the test, and after the exam is over, you're just not sure how well you did. You can't tell if you aced the test, if you did just okay, or if you did very poorly. The next day, you come to class, and the teacher puts this on the board: A, 12, B, 14, C, 5, D, 2, F, 1. And so I need to explain the scoring system in the United States if you don't already know it. But A is the top score. I guess maybe it's the equivalent of like a 10 in Mexico. I'm not sure, but it's the top score, and then B, C, D, and then F. I don't know why there's no E, but there's no E. But the bottom, the worst score is F. So you are thinking to yourself, well, I studied a lot, and it looks like most people did well. And I also know that, and I didn't include this in the scenario, but I also know that a lot of my friends did not study very much. They went to McCarthy's, they had a good time. They kept coming to me saying, let's go have a good time tonight. Let's go out, let's go to McCarthy's. And my response, your response has been, no, I've got a difficult chemistry class test coming up and I need to study. So I've stayed back in my room or the library and studied. So at this point, you're thinking, well, maybe I did okay. So the teacher then hands out the test face down. You slowly turn yours over and you see this, F. So what I would like for you to do is to take 3 minutes to respond to the following question. And go ahead and write this down if you can. If you're on your laptop, go ahead and make a notes file. If you have a pen and paper, go ahead and write it down. But write down how you felt, how did you feel, and how would you feel in terms of preparing for the next test. So go ahead and take about 3 minutes to do that. Yes, I'm here.
Later?
Yeah. Yeah, so what are some of the responses?
We have one. For you is I will feel very discouraged because on the first go I put lots of effort and I nothing in return.
Right.
Second, teacher, I out the signal some minutes later. What's the activity? I'm sorry, this is not a question. I could feel terrible, like my efforts were not rewarded by my results. I could feel discouraged but stressed at the same time.
Yeah.
The necessity of making another effort, but without the desire to do it, because I could feel that there is no point.
Right.
Would you answer something or make some comments?
Yeah, no, I was interested in hearing some of those responses. I think that's a very typical response, right? What I heard was very stressed, very frustrated, very discouraged. very understandable responses, right? Because you've done everything that you feel like you can, and you know the result was very, very bad. So my next question was, how would you feel in terms of preparing for the next test? In other words, would you feel good about preparing for the next test? You know, would you put a lot more effort into it, less effort into it?
Mike, exams cause me uncertainty, insecurity, and nervousness. Even when
Yes.
I trust my learning, I doubt what they care, ask, and how my answer is interpreted.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm feeling good at this moment, but the test, well, I'm gonna present an English evaluation the next week, so I'm kind of nervous.
Okay. 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 Thank you for those responses. Were there others?
Yes. More effort.
Yeah, put forth more efforts.
More effort. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Afraid if I did not study previously. Confused, sad, frustrated.
Yeah,
Frustrated, even scared of doing the next test.
right. Yeah.
I will.
Yeah, all very valid, yeah, very understandable responses, right? It would be probably most students would feel very discouraged. And again, you've already tried, you've already put in a lot of time, and the result was very, very bad, right? So I think most students would respond by maybe having less motivation next time, putting less effort into it, because why bother, right? So the next thing I'd like for you to do is to also then imagine an alternative scenario. So imagine, okay, there we go. Imagine how would you feel if the reverse were true? You got an A when you noticed that many others received one well, including some who didn't study. So those who did go to McCarthy's, or those who did go to, you know, the dance hall, or you know, those who had a good time, they didn't study, they still got a good grade. So how would you feel about that?
I think I will feel unsure of what my teacher wants for me, because it will be confused, because if I am making an effort and the others that don't do that, it will be very confused, and maybe we have to know clearly what is the point for that exam, what is the purpose of that
Right,
assessment, I think.
right. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so clearly this is not an example of really good teaching. But yeah, yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. I think a lot of students probably, if I studied really hard, would I go to McCarthy's the next time I have an opportunity and invitation to do so? Yes, right? Because I now know that I don't really have to study so much because nobody else studied very much, and I still got a good, you know, everybody else got a good grade. So why not have fun and enjoy life and get a grade? So what I would like for you to do now is to imagine that the situation's a little different. So it's similar in the sense that you studied really, really hard. You're not sure how you did, but it's different in how the teacher responded. So imagine the teacher responding differently. Imagine the teacher responding like this. So you come to class, there's nothing on the board, but what you get instead is a personal message from the teacher that says, F, I'm really surprised that you didn't do well on this test. I know you can do better. Please come and see me after class so we can talk about this. I'd like to suggest some strategies that you can use to learn this material. And then once you learn it, I'll let you take a makeup test and I'll average the two scores together. A very different scenario, right? I think most of us would rather have this teacher, but would you feel differently if the teacher responded this way? How so? How would you feel differently?
As you say, it would be like so cool if we have those kind of teachers. But and personally, I would feel like so special in some way because someone is trusting in you and all the
Yeah.
things we can do. And by giving you another chance to remake the test, it will encourage me by doing much better and use the strategies that the teacher is giving me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that, right? I think that your response is probably typical. I think probably most students are a little relieved. Now, they still have an F, and an F still sucks, but at least in this response, there is some hope. The student is more likely to want to try a little bit more, or maybe a lot more. So I wanted to illustrate that because those two different ways of a teacher responding help to shape the goals, the achievement goals that students have in their classroom. Okay, I've kind of asked that one. Oh, so I guess one more question before I move on. So with those two different types of feedback, the one where the grade is posted on the board and the other where you have the personalized note, where is the focus of each of those forms of teacher feedback? Any thoughts?
The first one, it is only related with the final grade, and the second one is related with the process or the effort that the student is doing. So it is the feedback more important than the final grade, I think.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that was exactly the answer I was hoping to hear. Yeah, with the personalized feedback, the emphasis is absolutely on learning, on the process, as you mentioned. It's on learning, right? The teacher is giving strategies. The teacher clearly knows the student because the teacher was surprised at the student's performance. And the teacher also believes that the student can do better, right? So the emphasis is on the student and on the student's learning. With the other one, as you mentioned, it's on the final grade. I might add that not just the final grade, but also where your grade is in comparison to other people. So if everybody got an F, that's maybe a different situation, right? And you would never know. I think the other thing I want to point out is with that second response, the individualized feedback that you got, you had no idea that you were the only F in class. I think that's really important, right? So if you know that you're the only F in class, the emphasis is on you being the only F in a larger social context, right? I know my F in relation to everybody else's grade. So it's that relationship between my performance and other people's performance. That's where the focus is, right? So again, to revisit achievement goals, they can be met through a couple of different ways. They could be met through development of ability or demonstration of ability. So through development of ability, that's me wanting to get better, wanting to improve. Through demonstration of ability, that's me demonstrating to other people that I am smart, or demonstrating to other people that I'm just not stupid. So there's researchers have talked about two different, or focused on two different types of goals. They've identified more goals, but today I just want to focus on these two. The first type is mastery goals, and the second type is performance goals. So a mastery goal, other names for mastery goals are development goals, learning goals, task involved goals, but you can see with all of those that the focus is on learning, right? So students who have mastery goals, they're interested, their goal is to develop new skills, to try to understand their work, to improve their level of competence, or achieve a sense of mastery based on their own standards. In contrast to that, performance goals, other names for performance goals are demonstration goals or ego involved. So with performance goals, the focus is on self-worth. And for me to have a sense of self-worth, that is in comparison to other people, right? It's more of it's a social construct. The emphasis is on outperforming others, and our self-worth is determined by others' perceptions of our ability. Performance goals are activated when tasks are presented as evaluative. So a hard test or a test that smart people do well on, like chemistry maybe, communicates to others that I am smart if I pass that test. Also activated when interpersonal competition is fostered. So that gives me an opportunity to compare my ability with other people. And when self-awareness is induced. So when the classroom is such that I'm allowed to be aware of my performance against other students, right? So I want to go back to mastery real quick. One thing I forgot to mention is that mastery goals, as you might expect, are associated with a whole host of positive outcomes. So students who adopt mastery goals, they're more likely to be motivated, more likely to be engaged, more likely to learn, and not just learn, but to learn using deeper processing strategies. And at the end of the day, it's also associated with achievement, like so getting good grades. So mastery goals are associated with many, many positive things and almost no negative things. Whereas performance goals, that's mixed. So sometimes that's associated with learning, sometimes it's associated with achievement, and sometimes it's not. So researchers began to focus on performance goals a little bit more to see under what conditions they are associated with positive outcomes and under what conditions they're associated with negative outcomes. And one thing that they discovered is that it's important whether students are approaching performance or avoiding performance. So we make that distinction. So does a student have a performance approach a goal or a performance avoid goal or avoidance goal? So if they have a performance approach goal, you know, that type of student is, oh, game on. Yes, give me an opportunity to demonstrate how well I perform against everybody else. Give me an opportunity to demonstrate how smart I am. Students who adopt a performance, and that type of goal is associated with achievement. I mean, it is. It is associated with learning, not necessarily associated with deeper learning processes, but learning. And performance goals, both approach and avoid, are also associated with cheating. Because again, it doesn't really matter if I learn or not. I mean, learning probably happens along the way, but the most important thing is that I have to look good. And if I cheat, you know, if cheating helps me to look good, then maybe I'm more likely to do that. So that's associated with cheating too. Performance avoid goals, that goal, a student that has that goal, they just don't want to look stupid. That is their goal. Just don't put me in a place where I have to look like I'm worse than my peers. So think about what that means, right? Well, I'll talk about that in a second. The first thing I want to do though is to ask this question. So again, keeping in mind that sometimes like that performance approach goals can be good or have positive outcomes such as learning and achievement. And also keep in mind, these are goals that students are bringing into the classroom. So they're bringing into these goals into the classroom regardless of what you want as a teacher. They're going to do this anyway, but there are some things you could do to encourage different goals. And so my question is, should one promote performance goals? So I think, and I asked this, I didn't ask about mastery, because should one promote mastery goals? Well, yes. I mean, there's really no controversy about that. But should a teacher promote performance goals? What do you all think?
I think you can promote this performance because you can develop some abilities of the students. Then it's a good topic to develop for them. And some knowledge are related about according to the context of the students. Then the performances are good for them. I think so. It's my opinion.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. I guess two comments about that. So with performance, I want to make a distinction between performance, which is sometimes you have to do to demonstrate learning, right? I think there's a difference between performing and a performance goal. So a performance goal isn't merely just doing something in classroom, but doing it to make you look smart, to make you look better than others. Actually, I was having the same discussion with a student last night, and the student shared that in their field, it's really important or it's more of a convention. It's something that is done in this field is for students to come in and present their projects on the board. And we were talking about, well, does that mean a performance goal is being induced? And maybe, but it depends on what the teacher says about that, right? So if the teacher is saying, oh, John, yeah, your portfolio is really bad. Jane's portfolio is much better. Your portfolio should be like Jane's. And that kind of feedback is measuring the student against other students and not necessarily against our criteria. On the other hand, it could be that, oh, okay, everybody, please look at John's portfolio and note how he can improve, or to note what things he's doing really, really well. That kind of feedback is really on the learning process, right? On learning, even though it's kind of demonstrating or it's public, the emphasis is still on learning. So it's the emphasis that is important. And I know I'm running just a little short on time, so I'm just going to make another comment about performance. And I don't know who contributed to that comment, but thank you very much. And I agree, right? If a student is coming in with a performance goal, they want to do well. Maybe there are sometimes to encourage that, right? So maybe Karen is in my class, and maybe I know that she just really needs to look smart on this particular task. That's what she needs. I know she needs a confidence builder. And maybe in that situation, that's okay to draw attention to her performance, right? To show everybody, oh, wow, look at how well Karen performed on this task. I think probably as a teacher, you also want to say something about her learning too, right? But in terms of like a classroom structure, where I am sending messages to everybody at the same time, because that's what classrooms are, right? We'd like to think that we're working with 30 individual students, and hopefully we can work one-on-one with 30 students, right? But we all know that teachers don't always have time to do that, and they have to make comments to the whole class at the same time. I think in that case, when teachers, like, say, for example, write all the scores on the board, or maybe they pass out the tests in the order from highest to lowest, and everybody knows that if I get my test last, that's the lowest. When a teacher does that, they're communicating, that your placement is important, right? So demonstrating is important. And some students will benefit from that, right? The ones who have high confidence already. Their response will be like, yeah, give me an opportunity to look smart. But I think the concern is that students who have low confidence are going to adopt performance avoid goals, right? Like, so, oh, just let me get through today and not look like an idiot. So I think that's the concern with promoting performance goals. So, and when I've been talking about promoting goals, so students will bring these goals into classrooms, but teachers can structure their classrooms in ways to promote certain goals. And these are, we call these goal structures. They are messages teachers send regarding the salient goals for a particular context. And we saw that with that first activity, right? The two different types of feedback. So the teacher that puts the scores on the board, they are communicating that it's important that you are not at the bottom. And maybe I am putting that on the board in a misdirected or a misguided belief that if you're at the bottom, you will try harder to be at the top. Neglecting to understand the student's perspective, or that student that got the F, they've already tried really, really hard. And the only thing you're inducing is a lack of self-confidence, frustration, no hope. Whereas if I give that personalized feedback, which is another goal structure, they don't know that they're the only F. I've given them some strategies to improve their scores. I'm allowing them to have another opportunity to demonstrate their learning and to average those scores. So that's another message. That message sends to the student that learning is important. So when we talk about goal structures, we can talk about those. We have an acronym that we use. So the acronym is TARGET. So the T in TARGET stands for tasks. So how can tasks be structured? So tasks that, so having a variety of tasks is one way, right? Like a teacher that just has the same task every single time, that doesn't really communicate to students that that learning is valued. The tasks should be meaningful. They should focus on understanding the material or developing a skill. They should provide an optimal level of challenge, so not too easy and not too hard, and they should be interesting. So we can think about goal structures in terms of tasks. We can think about goal structures in terms of authority, like who has the authority for learning? Is it the teacher that has the authority for learning, or is it students? So I think, again, in the interest of time, I want to make sure that we have enough time today. I think one of the ways we can give students authority for learning is giving them choices in assignments, maybe having them participate in developing grading rubrics could be a way to, and then using those to grade their peers' work could be a way to transfer authority to the student. R is recognition, and we saw that a little bit too, like earlier with the early activity. How am I recognizing students in the classroom? Am I putting everybody's score on the board so that they can see how well they did against others, or am I giving them feedback that focuses on learning? Or am I focusing on, wow, you got a good grade, Maria, or wow, Maria, you have learned a lot. At the beginning of the course, you were right here and you had trouble understanding X, Y, Z. And now you totally understand X, Y, Z. You have learned so much in this course. That is recognizing learning, right? Rather than recognizing merely a grade. Also, how we group students in the classroom. Are we grouping them in such a way that they're competing against one another, comparing what they're doing against other students? Or are we grouping them in such a way that they're cooperating with one another and collaborating with one another, working with one another, where the focus is on learning? Evaluation, how we're evaluating students. We've talked about that a little bit. And then time. And I know this is always a difficult thing to tell teachers or advice to give to teachers or people who are wanting to teach. But if you tell students, okay, we only have 3 minutes for this activity and then we need to move on, you're basically communicating that completing the activity is important. Learning is not necessarily the emphasis there, right? Or if we give time and space in the classroom for learning. So the last thing I'd like to do is another activity. So keeping those goal structures in mind, and I know that you all are in different groups, different classrooms, zooming in today. So what I'd like for you to do is to come up with some messages that will set the right tone for the first day of class. So keeping that target framework in mind, I'd like for you to create a list of recommendations, recommended activities, messages, classroom rules or policies, procedures for teachers to adopt on the first day of class. And I'm going to go ahead and remind you what the target framework there is: tasks, authority, recognition, grouping, evaluation, time. So go ahead, and I hate to do this. I've just talked about time, and I'm going to say that you only have a few minutes to do this. But my presentation is only so long, and I want to respect your time. I know everybody's busy. It's Saturday and everybody's busy. So go ahead and just take a few minutes, like maybe 4 minutes, to come up with some strategies, and then we'll meet at 10:45 and share some of the things that we came up with. Does that make sense?
Yes, Mike, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, I understand. Yeah, no, I didn't catch you said that, but thank you. Those are some great structures, right? So what I heard was an emphasis on this is what we're doing as a group. I also heard these are our learning goals for the semester. And again, those are, yeah, the emphasis, the focus there is on learning, which is great. I think that's a super, super, super idea. Very consistent with what we've been talking about. Oh. Okay. I hope this was fun for you all. Dr. Gio told me, read to me a couple of comments in the chat. And one of the ones that I heard was to create ground rules as a group, and to note what the learning objectives are for the class. I love that, because clearly I think the emphasis is on learning, not on performance. The other thing, another one that I heard, which, oh gosh, really, really good, is to have students create a list of topics to investigate during the class. That is just, oh, what a great idea, right? So again, the focus is on learning and their individual interests. So again, the focus is on their learning, their interests, not how well they do compared to other students. So super. Were there others?
We don't have more answers on chat, but if anyone wants to open the mic, it's open right now.
Oh, super.
Well, I feel like going through the syllabus right from the beginning of the first day, it will be much better if you go through, because usually what I have seen from Mexico is that they do it to the second or third week of school. So I feel like going right from the beginning to know what to expect from the class will be much, much better.
Yeah, especially when the syllabus. So yeah, I agree. That's good practice in general, right? I think in terms of goals, I think especially when the syllabus emphasizes learning goals, right? Which most syllabi do, right? These are the learning goals for the class. This is how we will do it. Outlining activities or tasks that we talked about earlier that were clearly learning oriented in nature and not just simply tasks to be done for the sake of doing them. But yeah, I think the language in the syllabus can be really, really important, right? And especially, and if so, then yes. Yeah, that probably needs to happen earlier in the course than later. So yeah, thank you so much for that comment. Anything else? And I'm going to stop sharing since that activity is done, but. Okay, so I think we have just a few minutes left, and I just wanted to make sure we had time if anybody had any questions.
Do you think that if you give that opportunity to our students or your students to be part of the develop of the topics, it will increase the motivation that they need.
Okay, I was having a little trouble hearing that. Could you repeat it?
Yes, that if we as a teachers take in count the thought of our students, their interests, it will be I don't know, a point for us to increase their motivating. I mean, I know that it is they will have the opportunity to choose what they want to learn, but is that related with the motivation that they need to develop throughout the course?
Yeah, so I think what I heard was the role of interest and whether that's important. Also recognizing that some students don't have a choice. They may not have choices in the classroom, right? They may be taking a class because they have to. But I think my response is yes, interest is really important. I think there's some things that teachers can do to increase interest, even if a student is taking a class that they don't, that they have to take, or the topic's not interesting. I think getting to know the students when you can, and it may take a little while, right? And again, if you have a large class, that might be difficult to do, but if you can even find, okay, generally, and maybe I'm 20 years, which I am about 20, depending on who's in my class, but I am 20 to 30 years older than many students that I might be teaching. So I can't relate, that's a different generation, right? So I have no idea what students are interested in now. So, and certainly, the first day, I'm not going to know that, but I think it's important for teachers to listen to students during breaks, maybe to find out what, what kinds of media they're interested in, what movies, what TV shows, but then most importantly, asking them why, or I've never heard of that. Can you describe it? Can you explain it? And I think over time, then you begin to get a sense of what that generation of students are interested in. But I think even in terms of the content, the material, I think it's important for teachers to sometimes be explicit. This is why this information is important. And to maybe even share why you're interested in it. If you're teaching it, there's probably a reason why you're interested in it. And even just to share, like, oh, okay, we're going to be teaching this today. It's one of my favorite topics. And this is why it's one of my favorite topics. That can be contagious as well. I think sometimes students are like, what? This is interesting? Somebody's interested in this? Even that can be interesting. Like, why are they interested in this? I need to know more, right? So, yeah, I appreciate the challenge of that for sure, but I think there are some things teachers can do to stimulate student interest. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not. I still had trouble hearing it, but.
No, yes, you are right, because it is not only, I mean, we as a teacher, we need to know our students, and that take time on talking with them, ask them, and if they know that we are interested in them, then we are going to be more, they are going to feel more comfortable during our classes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I got a question. It's similar
Question.
hers. For setting up goals, would it be better if we let the students to make a goal, or is better to just have it as a teacher right from the beginning?
That's a good question. So that's a really good question. I know that sometimes teachers have a lot of pressure, right? So sometimes we have objectives that students have to meet. That's the goal, right? And that is our job. That's what the course says. Students who are taking this course will learn X, Y, Z. I think the important thing is to have a very transparent conversation with students about those goals, about the objectives that teachers have for their students. And I think that through those kind of conversations, I think it's important for students to adopt those goals as well. And that only happens through dialogue. Well, I shouldn't say it only happens through dialogue, but I think it often will happen through dialogue. And students are more likely to adopt that, to make those their own goals, if the teacher does other things as well. So some of the other things that teachers need to do in order for students to adopt those goals, or they still may not adopt them, but I think some things teachers can do that will help, is to create a safe environment that fosters relationships. If students respect the teacher, then they're more likely to adopt the goals that the teacher has. The other thing that's really, really important is for to build a student's sense of competency in class. So if it's too easy or too hard, students aren't going to buy into the goals as much. But so it's important that the activities have that optimal level of challenge, right? It needs to be a little challenging, but not too much. And then I think the third thing is to still try to give some students some autonomy and choice within those goals, right? So yes, this is the goal that I have for you in class. You know, these are the projects that you need to do, but you can have some choices in what you do in order to meet those learning goals. I think that is transferring responsibility to the student. And I think that, you know, that when that happens, then they're more likely to adopt those goals as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because that's something that I've been dealing with, because, you know, like sometimes I feel like too much pressure from the professors or the in charge, and I feel like I need to do much better, but also I feel like it's way too much, and I don't know what to do in the classroom. Like you say, we have to set up goals, but knowing that it might not work the way it's expected.
Yeah. So I think so I was talking about transparent conversations. One thing I tell students on the first day of class is, you know, here's the truth, everyone. The truth is that I do not care about your grade. I do not care. And yet, at the same time, the university requires me to grade your work. But here's what I do care about. I care very much if you learn. I'm also, because you're in my class, and maybe this isn't your goal, and that's okay, but I am just telling you that my assumption is that you are here to learn. So there are two games that are being played here, right? There is the teacher game where I have to give you tests, you have to take the tests, I have to report your grade, and then there's the game that you're a part of, and that is learning. Now, if you are here to learn, probably you will have good grades, right? They should, if the assessments are good and solid and really align with learning, then they will reflect your learning. But this learning part, that is your game. And so I think that's one of the messages that you can give students on that first day of class too, right?
Thank you.
No, thank you. And Dr. Gio, I don't know if we have more time for one more, or
I think we are
out.
Yeah, we don't have more time.
Okay.
The students have to take a rest.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not sure, I couldn't see you. I would have liked to have met you, but thank you all so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. It was a pleasure being a part of your day today.
I want to thank Mike for this interesting presentation about motivation. Thank all of you for taking the time for this presentation. I'm gonna share with you a form. Please, I'm gonna speak in Spanish, Mike, sorry. Tienen el formulario que les voy a compartir por su tiempo. Mike, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Of course, thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Adios.